Genesis chapter 13, one of the subjects I was given at PTP in Branson, very simply began with the title, Today I Will. And they allowed me to fill in the blank. And so what I wrote for thought was, today I will, I will be more like the Sea of Galilee than I am the Dead Sea. I want you to take a trip with me in your mind for a second. From where we're standing in our minds, I want you to look to the southwest. And you will see towering over that little part of the earth, Masada. It stands about 1,400 feet high. If you turn from the southwest to the northwest, you will see what was the civilization of Qumran. 12 miles to the northeast of where we're standing is Mount Nebo. Now, when you look that direction, you really see a mountain for the first time in that area. It reaches 4,000 feet. 70 miles due north is the Sea of Galilee. It is beautiful. It is blue-green. It is teeming with life. It provides life to everything around it. And then down the Jordan Valley, the waters flow to the south. Each one of those points is a place of life and death. Masada had been a Roman fortress, thriving, busy, built by Herod the Great. Became the site of a mass suicide of Jewish revolutionists in AD 73. The second one on the list there, Qumran, was a bustling hive of activity where the Dead Sea Scrolls were written and later discovered. Mount Nebo was the pedestal on which Moses stood to give both blessings and cursings and to hand down the law and then to die. The Sea of Galilee is surrounded by little farms and little villages. People going about the business of fishing on the lake, but it's also the site of much of the ministry of Jesus, a ministry that was cut short by violence, by arrogance, by jealousy. If you orientate yourself to those landmarks and then you look where you're standing on the shores of the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is also an image of life and death. It's hard to imagine for us. We look at the Dead Sea, we study it a little bit, and we realize that 30% of it is solid material. That over the years, the minerals have built up to its almost beginning to approach the level where it will be at one point as solid as it is liquid. And there's no life there. The Dead Sea is about the deadest place on the face of the earth. Nothing grows there. Nothing lives on its shores. The water is undrinkable. And yet that has not always been the case. Did you see it in the text in Genesis chapter 13 when we read? Genesis 13 and verse 10 says, as Lot surveyed the land, because he and Abraham are so wealthy, they cannot dwell in the same place. Their herds are so large, they cannot graze the same pasture land. And so they're going to separate. And as Lot surveys the land, it says in the text that all the valley of the Jordan was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord. So the image we get in our mind as we look through Lot's eyes is the Garden of Eden. The image we get as we look through Lot's eyes, he said, is like the land of Egypt. And that Nile Delta, that rich, dark earth that produces. It's not an image we think of. It's not the image that pops into our head when we hear the word Dead Sea. And yet archaeologists have collected all kinds of seeds along the southern shore, wheat and barley and dates and grapes and figs and almonds and olives. It was once productive. It was once green. It was once fertile. So the question becomes, what happened? What changed for the Sea of Galilee? When did it change? And why? The hint is also there in Genesis chapter 13. It says that's what it looked like before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So as Paul Harvey would say, that's the rest of the story. That God made a vivid point. That God stretched out His hand and He broke them. And He left an image that will never change. Because once He killed it, it's dead. So both life and death on the shores of even the Dead Sea. So I'm going to ask you a question. Why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Why was God so angry with the evil that's right there at the end of that text in Genesis 13, that He not only gets the city, He gets the whole valley. He gets the whole Dead Sea and everything that is around it. Why make such a powerful statement? But as you answer that question in your mind, be very careful. Why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? We have a ready response. We have an easy response. We have a convenient answer. God destroyed them because of homosexuality. God destroyed them because of sexual perversion. I want you to understand something this morning. That is true, but it's only about that true. There's some more to the formula. The homosexuality, the sexual perversion, is the straw that finally shatters the camel's back. It's what causes God to finally act in Genesis 19. But in Genesis 13, for example, and we're going to look at some other texts, what was it He said? He didn't say the men of Sodom and Gomorrah were sexual perverts and homosexuals. He broadened it. He said they were exceedingly evil. There was more going on than that. Homosexuality may be the last drop. that fills God's cup of wrath to the point that it is overflowing, but it is not the whole answer. Run through some text with me for a minute. Luke chapter 17, verses 28 and 29 says, "And it happened the same as in the days of Lot." So he's going to describe the days of Lot for us. They were eating, they were drinking, they were buying, they were selling, they were planning, they were building. But on the day Lot left Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Catch the underlines. They were eating, they were drinking, planning, building, buying, selling. They were just going about life. The last day that they existed, Jesus doesn't say anything about anything abnormally immoral. He doesn't list anything evil in the list. But also, he does not mention anything spiritual. He does not mention anything about faith or about God or about a relationship. They were too busy to be concerned with God. They were too busy to be concerned with anything other than going about their everyday normal life. And it's at that moment that God catches them unaware. So one word, they were self-centered. And that is the theme if you look every time God discusses the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. There is a theme of self-centeredness. A theme of them being focused on themselves, what they wanted to do, what they wanted to believe, what they wanted to be the direction of their lives. Deuteronomy chapter 29. Verse 19 through 23. It shall be when he hears the words of this curse that he will boast. I have peace, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart in order to destroy the watered land with the dry. The Lord will never be willing to forgive him. The anger of the Lord and his jealousy will burn against that man. Every curse which is written in this book will rest on him. The Lord will blot out his name from the heaven. Single him out for an adversary from all the tribes of Israel. Now the generation to come, your sons who rise up after you, the foreigner who comes from a distant land, when they see the plagues on the land, when they see the diseases, they're going to say, all is brimstone and salt, a burning waste, unsown, unproductive. No grass grows in it, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. Did you see it? Self-willed, self-directed, self-centered. There's no mention of a sexual perversion in that text. But he says, when you get to the point and you're in the land of Israel and you're self-centered and you're self-willed and you're directing your own steps, people around you are going to look at you and go, that's just like Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's why fire and brimstone are raining down on that individual's life. The result of that destruction there is going to be them purposefully ignoring God. So again, we go back to one word, self-centered. Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 49 and 50. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. All right, so now we're going to actually get a list of what Sodom was doing wrong. Arrogance, plenty, carefree, did not help the poor and needy, haughty, and they committed abominations before me. Notice all of the things that come before the abominations. What's the point? The point is, everything they are doing is about themselves, to the point that their arrogance, their pride, their self-will led them to do abominable things. But it was a progression. It was a progression of arrogance. It was a progression of building a life where they had plenty and did not have to worry about it. A life that was carefree and a life that was flowing all to the self. They would not even help the needy and the poor. They were soaking it all up. Summarized in verse 50, they're haughty. And when you get to that point, when you're arrogant, when you no longer need God, when your pride has reached the point that you are the center of your universe and everything is about you, the next step is the abominations. The next step is ignoring God's design for my life and acting contrary to His will. So again, one word, Sodom and Gomorrah, self-centered. You can use one of the others if you'd rather, haughty, arrogant. And it corrupted everything in their lives. To the point, by the time we see them in the middle of Genesis, or in that first third of Genesis, they are so perverted that they cannot find their way back. So here's the thing. Attributing the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, attributing the death of the Dead Sea to a single sin of sexual perversion, it's not only convenient, it kind of lets us off the hook. Because at least individually, it doesn't describe most of us. But when we begin to see the sin behind the sin, when we begin to see the sin that would cause us to ignore God's law, that would cause us to pervert the good that He put into place, suddenly self-will, self-centeredness, pride, arrogance, those things hit a little closer to home. Because who does not like for the good things in life to flow in and stay? Who doesn't want to, in some measure, direct his own steps? And that leads us to the understanding that all sin, no matter how disgusting or, quote, accepted it is a sin that disgusts God. You see, we're quick to point out God was disgusted with Sodom and Gomorrah because they were sexual perverts. They tried to get Lot's guests out of the house to have sexual relations with them. Well, that's not an acceptable sin to us, so that disgusts us. But it's an acceptable sin to us to be a little arrogant before God and say, well, I deserve this and I deserve that. It's acceptable to us to say, God, I want all the blessings you can possibly give me, but please don't ask me to share them with anybody else. I can park them in my garage. I can park them in my driveway. When I run out of room, I'll build another garage. I'll buy a storehouse. And yet that is just as disgusting to God. Just as much a sin as homosexuality, sexual perversion. B, when we actually get to the heart of it, we realize that all sin is a result of self-will. The sins that I commit in my life stem from the exact same place that the sins of a mass murderer stem from. They stem from the same place that the sins of a mass rapist stem from. How can you possibly say that? Because they all come from self-will. The point where I decide that what God said no longer matters, and I'm going to choose to act the way I want to act. That's why God has to start with the law by saying, I am the Lord your God. You'll have no other gods before me. I have to be at the center of it. I have to be the key to everything, or it's not going to matter if I tell you to love your neighbor as yourself. It's not going to matter if I tell you do not lie. It's not going to matter if I tell you do not murder, because if I'm not at the center of it, if self-will is at the center of it, then there's no governing agent. Put me back where I belong. Summed up by Jesus answering, what's the great commandment? Well, he said, I'll give you two. Sodom and Gomorrah are toast because of their self-centeredness. What does that say about us as individuals? What does that say about us as a nation? What does that say about us as the body of Christ if our focus is not where it's supposed to be? And it's why the Dead Sea is dead. Every blessing that flows into the Dead Sea from the Jordan stays in the Dead Sea. It's the lowest place on the face of the earth. It cannot flow out. It collects. As it collects, the water evaporates and it leaves behind all the blessings that it brought down the Jordan with it. And they become the very things that kill the Dead Sea. We have to put the blame where the blame goes. If all I do is collect in this life all the blessings of God and they never flow through me, they will kill me. They will overwhelm me. So number one, this indicts us all. Number two, it explains a lot about the condition of our lives, why we have trouble finding joy, why we have trouble finding fulfillment and contentment. It explains a lot about our nation. It explains a lot about why NBC can run the opening ceremonies of the Olympics and get away with it. They would not run those if they thought it was going to cost them a dime. They ran it because we're not going to do anything about it. That's back to what I said earlier. When the fight's on, that's what's scary about it. Is they do what they do because they're not scared of our God and they're not scared of us. So again, it explains why so many things in our lives are off center. When I live for myself, not only is there the danger of the perversion that Sodom and Gomorrah ends up with, my life will always be out of kilter. I'll never find joy. I'll never find fulfillment. I'll never be content in being in Christ. There'll always have to be something more, something else added to my life. And that's why sometimes we get in the middle of a week, we evaluate our week, and we realize, man, I just don't feel good about my life right now. I feel more dead than alive. Go back and ask, what's the focus? Are you the Sea of Galilee or are you the Dead Sea as we stand and sing?